Hey, worship teams, worship leaders, Brandon Dempsey here, worship team training, our Hangout podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to have you. We got a fantastic show and a fantastic time. We have fantastic friends right here following us on. Please say hello to all of our friends on Periscope right here. Say hello, Periscope. Give us some hearts. You guys are awesome.
Periscope.
And we got some great people coming on. You guys are great because you're watching this here on YouTube. You're probably watching it live right now through our site at worshipteamtraining.com. And by God, can you please stop him from moving? That thing is so distracting. Anyway, I hope that you guys can see it. Glad that you're here. A big hello to our very own Rich Kirkpatrick. How are you today, Rich?
I'm doing great. Great this morning. I have coffee, so
yes.
West Coast time.
Yeah. Yes, and you still walked away from last night and you're able to tell about it.
Oh, yeah, last night was great.
That was a webinar last night.
Great questions, too, from the participants.
Who was on our webinar last night?
All I know is that there's several of them that had some really good questions about the roles they play in leading worship and how to talk about it.
Right. We do a good game talking about it, that's for sure. So, anyway. but good. So I was there and it was great. Awesome. Thanks, Dustin. Dustin right here. Dustin Baker, thanks so much, bro, on Periscope. Tweeting out right now, the man, because he joined the webinar last night. He was awesome. And Rich, it was great having you share from your heart. Thanks for your time being there. Fantastic. And folks, we just say that again. All of our webinars, you can find it at worshipteamtraining.com/events. So join us on the next free webinar. They're free for that night only as we do them live, and after that they get a playback. So we're glad that you're able to join us on that. Be sure to check out the next one coming up, the next schedule, because we got some fantastic folks and can't wait to show you. Anyway, and our special guest today, Kim Bontrager. Now this is exciting because she's good friends with Cynthia Cullen, and we've had Cynthia on twice, I think. That's way too many times. But Cynthia is just amazing, just a fountain of energy. And now we got like another fountain of energy right here. You put two of them in the room, and anything can happen.
Watch out.
Watch out. Get your raft and your life preserver. So Kim she's been involved in worship leading for over 20 years at her church. Currently serves as the creative arts director at First Mennonite Brethren Church in Wichita, Kansas. Kim and her husband Neil, who is also a freelance videographer, and live just outside of Wichita with their two kids, 13 and 17-year-old, hard to believe. And their home is often filled with teenagers and unquenchable appetites for pop and Wi-Fi. I don't know how that got into the bio, but hey, you know. But you can check out, you can Google and go to their website, First Mennonite Brethren Church, and follow Kim. Kim, I'm following her right now on, she actually followed me, so I got to follow her back on Twitter. But without any further ado, I'll give you her address in a minute. Everybody, please welcome Kim Bontrager. Kim, how are you doing today?
I am doing great, and I also have my coffee, Rich.
Yes.
Because it's daytime, not just. But I'm doing great. I'm thawed out from the morning of incredibly cold temperatures here, and
it does get cold there. I was in a blizzard one year over there. That was.
Yeah, it does. It does, but I can't complain. It's not nearly as bad as some other areas of the country, but it's just cold as cold, and so yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm glad that you're able to be here today and the cold didn't scare you off.
It did not.
So, that's good. That's very good, very good. So let's go ahead and get right to it, folks. We're talking today about understanding our culture better and how can we do that in the capacity of leading them. If we're leading worship, if we're planning for worship, what better way, of course, than to be better familiar with the people that God has chosen us to minister to. And sometimes that's kind of a lost thing that we don't think about, but I find that it's extremely important, and you know, because that's the whole point. It's not about putting on a show, and it's not about the fun things that we get to do in church, but it's really about the people who are there. So Kim Bontrager, you can follow her. It's at Kim Bontrager, Bontrager, and Kim, I'm following you right now, and you got to follow us back on Worship Team Training too. So you got to do both. You know.
Okay.
But anyway, so without any hesitation, let's go ahead and get to the questions because we got some great questions. Neil, our content guy, creator, who's been working on this webinar now for a while, has done a great work, and so big shout out to Neil. Our first question, and Rich, this is going to go to you. As worship leaders and worship planners, yeah, you're up on the spot already. Oh, yeah, Kim's already following us. That was fast. Thanks, Kim. Multitasker, Rich. We were talking about that last night. So, first question, Rich. As worship leaders and worship planners, where are we to place our attention? I mean, that's kind of the whole topic of today's YouTube show, our podcast show with Kim. With God being the primary audience of our worship services, corporate worship must be aimed, of course, in God's direction, right? But we do need to tune into the culture of church in order to lead them well. That's what Kim said. Do you agree with Kim or not?
Well, I would be really stupid not to agree with someone so smart.
Very smart.
And no, I really do agree with that. And I would look at the metaphor of, say, you're building architecture of a church building, and when you build architecture of church building, you want it. How is this going to be a place where obviously its first goal is to lead worship, is for people to enter, but also how is it inviting to people who are guests as well. And so I think how you would plan a program. Your thing is so you're really when Jesus said love your neighbor as yourself, but also put the great commandment with that as one thing. I think the focus, you can't ever take our love for God and our worship for God separate from our desire to invite non-worshipers to worship at some point. So I think really I think it's a very powerful statement to make, that those, it's a both and. Of course, one might be first and the other second, but it's also a both and. And so I think that's the tension. But I think it's a tension that the Scripture, I think, makes pretty clear to us as ministry leaders.
Kim, you got us thinking really hard about this topic, and I love. So what does this all mean to you? Can you maybe give us a little back end of your church, because that probably would explain where you're coming from also. What's been the missional aim of your church, and how do y'all take culture seriously, and why is that important?
Well, the history, the background of this idea and why I've thought about it so much is that for years the church that I'm in had a blended worship style. And since I've been here, we've made a transition to having two different worship styles. And I know that that's not necessarily how everyone answers that kind of question, but for us, it almost, I'll throw out another analogy. Rich had the architecture thing, the language analogy. It started to become a thing where there's our church is 75 years old, so we have all generations here. And we have a healthy population of very sincere, driven Christians who still resonate with a very traditional style. And what I started realizing is that we're kind of forcing them to walk into a room and worship in a language that's not native for them. And it would be like me walking into a room every week and saying, I'm going to be a part of this church even though the worship service is in German and I know not a word of German. After a while, that's not going to be so effective for me. And do we force people to change their native language, or do we try to accommodate a little bit more? And for this congregation, I'm not saying it's true for everyone, for this congregation the best choice was we're going to offer two languages. So we went to a classic traditional style and then a contemporary style, and it has worked for us. So that's the background here, because our philosophy of worship is much like what Rich was saying. You want to create something where the people in the room who normally come, who call this their church, who depend on these experiences to be their way to connect with God corporately, you want to create something they can engage with authentically. But it also needs to be welcoming to people from the community. And if you look at the people in your church and assume that they're kind of going to be inviting people in like them, then we felt like the best decision, to be truest to ourselves, was to create these two venues that had two different languages, if you will, because I actually think that one of the best ways to create a great worship service that meets or is appealing to guests or people who haven't worshiped God ever before is to be in a room where the people in the room are fully engaged, and that is almost more important than the stylizing of the worship service.
Yes.
That if I see someone worshiping and finding freedom in that, like that should be the appeal.
Right.
So
right.
that's kind of where we've come from.
Gosh, that's so good. That's so good. I think a couple episodes ago we were talking about this, Rich, and it's more like the style. Oh, sorry, Rich, you're drinking.
Because it's daytime.
That's right. That's right.
I drink at nighttime though too, just so you know, coffee at night.
That's true.
I had to get on a worship leader today who's been drinking way too much coffee. I'm not saying any names. But you know, I think that's where we've been in trouble in the church, is that we've allowed style to precede authentic worship. And what is authentic worship? We go back to what the scriptures say about what worship is and who we're worshiping. And so that's what kind of led us to this point. So with that in mind, I love the second question here. When it comes down to, if we're talking about worship, and Kim, you said that very well, as far as finding the people in the service who are worshiping versus those that are just being attracted to the style. But there is some sort of style that has to be involved in order to speak the language, like what you said. So how do you find the right leaders, the right musicians, the right singers to help engage that talent? Or a better way to say it is, you know, how do we steward well the particular talents that are present within the church? How do you do that in yours?
You're asking me? Yeah.
I'm talking to you.
Okay. Well, there are two parts to that, and one of them would be, how do you engage and start to work with people who are new to you and who have gifts and are interested in getting involved? The other part of that is being sensitive to stewarding the people who are involved, who are consistently involved, because that group of people, like my band and vocalists, that pool of people, they are almost another audience that I serve, because they have a certain depth of talent and depth of experience, and also they're largely adults with families and jobs, and so they have limited time and energy to give to this. So it becomes a really big factor in planning and looking at what the worship service configuration can be. How much tension can the system of my band really take before I'm breaking people? You know what I mean? Yeah. So that it's that kind of stewardship. How far can I push this bass player who might have problems with rhythm? How far can I push him on this week where we have a 2-hour rehearsal and he came right from work and one of his kids is sick and blah, blah, blah? How far can I push this vocalist who loves to sing but will never memorize? How much can I demand from them? But they have a great heart, and they're a great singer, and it's a great they're a great presence on the stage to help bring people into worship. So that give and take, thoughtfulness about who's in the band on any given week has a lot to do with how our worship services are shaped. Because I don't have cookie cutter bands. Not everyone can pull off the wall of guitar Hillsong situation. Yeah. So there's that sensitivity to the congregation, and then there's the sensitivity to like the musicians as another audience that you want to be faithful to, give just enough challenge without breaking them.
Right. Okay. I love that. So it's kind of like finding the line of what's too much, what's overkill for that person. Rich, you're nodding your head there. So what's going on with you? What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm just nodding my head during that entire diatribe, because I think a good leader like Kim is.
Wait, is that a new chord?
Anyway, forget that. Those are stupid words.
I like that.
I forget I'm talking to worship leaders here. Okay, but this is where I think Kim. I think worship leaders, we need to see ourselves as leaders, and this is where a lot of people think all I do is show up, and if I'm worshiping God, my team follows me and the church follows me. Where I'm thinking, no, a good leader is someone like what Kim's modeling, who is seeing all the tensions that affect the environment and that are affecting the goal of pulling and allowing people or taking away barriers, all those kinds of things in a service. And to me, that really what she's saying is the tensions. You have these different things you have to manage and pray through. And as a leader, okay, here's how, I can pull this one, I can push this one this far, and I can, know my audience. I got to study. I got to, so spinning plates. And that's where multitasking people, that's why the women have an advantage, I think, sometimes in these roles, because they're able to do this a little bit better than us.
Yes, I fully agree.
There should be more female worship leaders, I think, anyway. But the whole idea...
Totally agree.
Totally.
Because of this, because the tensions, because it's like working a kitchen. You have... And I'm a decent cook. I'm actually, because my wife she's a principal, and I'm the cook in the house. And there's certain things you have to put. And if you're going to get the stew in time with the bread or the rice and all these things, so the dinner's served in time, it's really important. So some people are nodding their head. Other people are saying, "Rich, great. I don't cook at all." But the tensions here, a good leader is going to see these tensions and is going to address them. And understand that all of those things are important. Now, here's where some people, I think, might misinterpret this and say, well, I have to pick between my band and the church, or there's like an either or. When really this is where mature leaders think of both and. Just because you're thinking about the band doesn't mean that's the first goal of the whole band, is that their needs are served. But because obviously we're leading the congregation, that's our first thing. But at the same time, you have to have that intention. This is where a lot of younger people, I think, need to listen and understand learn from someone like Kim, is that it takes that sensitivity to all of these contributing factors. And as a leader, being able to see, okay, this is how far we can go with our style this way. This is why we need two different venues. This is why, so it's always working in those tensions where good leaders, which we as worship leaders need to embrace. And so all that to say is that's a very important, that both and thinking, the tension there doesn't change our priorities. Like, we're there as to lead worship, but we're going to have 15 priorities. If you have multiple children, you may have to spend more time on one. Doesn't mean you don't love them all the same, or at least equally. And so this is kind of where those who are growing up in their leadership, as you grow as a leader, you'll become like Kim, hopefully, able to deal with these tensions.
Aim higher.
Well, I love what you both have said as far as looking at the ministry that we have as another congregation, not a separate congregation, but they're people that we pour into just as much as the ones that we do lead on services. And having that balancing your time is important. Kim, I love what you said there as far as not stressing your bass player or your singer so much, because you're trying to work within their capacity, and we are being good stewards of our worship team. And I think that wouldn't you agree that there's a lot of worship leaders that may not have that perspective, where they may think, well, they're just my band and they'll just play whatever I want them to play, and we clock in, clock out, and that's it. is there a deeper relationship that can exist, that goes on?
Oh, definitely, definitely. Um, I have read several blogs over the years of worship leaders who really do a great job at every week their band is doing some kind of deep biblical study together before they rehearse. I have not been able to pull that off, so I'm not like claiming to have that level, but definitely just paying attention to people's lives and tuning in when someone has something significant going on in their life and realizing that that has an effect on their ability to perform well. Creating space. We do hang out as a band every week a little bit before we rehearse and just have, like normal weird musician banter and snacks, by the way.
Yes.
And all of this, I will say, as a woman leading this situation, most of the time I'm in a room with primarily men. And so I'm also leaning on some of the other men in the group who have really pastoral hearts, who catch things and may, initiate a conversation with another guy. Oh, goodness. Sorry. That was my phone that I forgot to put on Do Not Disturb. But I'm relying on other men sometimes to care for each other in ways that I really can't get in there and do. But definitely, I want the group to know each other as well as they can, given the little time that they spend together, really, and feel comfortable even kidding around with each other, comfortable giving ideas. There's all kinds of arrangement ideas that come out of every corner of the stage when we're practicing. Yeah. And just fostering that environment, that's totally, I wouldn't do it any other way. I don't know any other way to do it.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Well, that's spoken by the words of a true leader right there, who believes and invests in their people. Rich, you invest in your people greatly. Ultimately, who else do you feel is affecting the decisions that we make, the goals we set, and the visions that we have?
Who else, as far as leaders? Of course, you have your pastor.
Right.
Ultimately, that's where we, gain our best authority to do this. So, obviously, if our pastors aren't thinking about the language differences, for instance. And that's where a lot of us can partner. I think, if we're chasing after a style, as you said, that's one thing. So, who we listen to is important. And I think Kim kind of laid out, we have the congregation and the community, 75-year-old congregation, she knows, as Leonard Sweet says, her zip code also. So who's in the town and who's there. And then there's also the issue of course, your leadership over you is what is their heart. And then, listening to all those folks, and then, of course, the personnel, the people that serve with you under your team. So those are all factors that you listen to. And, of course, this idea of leading up is important, where we partner with our pastor so their vision is lived out. So if there is a dilemma about this, when they're thinking about evangelism and youth ministry and the mortgage on the church building and 15 other things, we have the opportunity to focus on this one area and offer solutions. So we should become one of those persons that people are listening to. And so earning that trust is really important, not blowing all our chips on incidental things as worship leaders, but also, being willing to step out as a leader and think through these things, because leadership's a lot of thinking, folks. And, just hearing Kim talk, you can tell the mental capacity she has and has used in living her role out, and that's a good model for us. Because it's great to spend a lot of mental capacity on what pedal you might be using for your guitar. If we were to take... and it's true, I'm going to...
that much.
But no, I went to the NAMM show a few years ago. I'm going tomorrow. It's the biggest trade show here in Southern California, and it's the music merchant, so everything is there. And I went with some worship guitarists, and they were looking at the diodes and the circuitry of pedals.
Yeah.
Was interesting. So I'm not kidding about this. I think sometimes, we have to step back a little bit, and we have to really think through, so we can become a voice too. So we're not like battered with the idea of being in a position of leadership without having the mind to think like a leader. And I understand many times I'm speaking from personal experience where I've been battered and smacked down to the ground or on my back in a fetal position, is because I was not allowing myself to think like a leader and grow in that. So anyone who thinks they can just get up there and be the point person and lead a band and, all the factors we're talking about, take listening. So you do have to listen to a lot of different voices and then learn how to filter it, and then go back up to your leadership and say, here's a solution based on all the voices, yours first, of course, Pastor, and, here's what I've been looking through Scripture, here's what I hear in the community, here's what this thing, and so I have a solution or two. I have like a couple things that we could do that I'm owning that we can help move our church forward in worship.
Wow. That is, I love just hearing the wisdom being poured out right now, and it's just, it amazes me every time when we come and do a podcast show together. We have great people on like Kim that just share her heart and mind, what God's doing. I mean, just means the world to us. So I got to ask this question, Kim. When we talk about investing into our people and our culture, what's the one? What is the one thing that you keep coming back to?
One thing. I'm horrible at one things. The one thing I keep coming back to is that God has called me to be in this position at this place right now to try to lead this group of people into deeper and deeper experiences of worship together. Period. And so that influences song choice and musician choice and flow of the service and how I interact with my pastor, which, Rich, that was brilliant, what you just said, by the way. You should, write books or something, Rich. And I know. So that, staying centered on what the call actually is, softens me up to the people around me. Because left to my own devices, I'm really a task list person, and I have to remind myself that it's the people, that I'm called to lead and create opportunities for this group of people. I'm not called to a bullet list that reappears magically every week. So yeah, for me, that's what it is.
Wow, awesome. Well, Kim, as always, as I said throughout this broadcast, thanks so much for being here, sharing everything that God has given you to share back out with us. So you're being an awesome steward of your time and your heart, so thank you.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. It's been good.
Yeah, we need to do this again, and we need to have you and Cynthia up on the same...
So totally, I would be here, yes.
That would, I think that would just be too nutty, but we're all about that, though, so that's what's fun about it.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, Kim, thanks for being here. It's awesome. We'll have you back, definitely.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, it's and Rich, of course, as always, man, knocked it out of the park last night, this morning. Thank you again, too, for sharing your heart as always.
Yeah, it's such a privilege, and just to mention that what Kim was talking about the role and calling is what that next webinar is going to be about.
Right.
The idea of February 2nd, we're going to talk about, your legacy is your life, not your role. So, what is it that you're actually called to, and how to kind of ferret that out. And so that's going to be that might be a little difficult conversation, actually, even for me to talk through. But I'm looking forward to that.
Well, it's going to be Groundhog Day, not on the 2nd.
Yeah, and that's my daughter's birthday, so I got it.
So we'll see. Well, everyone will see if Rich will see his shadow or not.
Got
Got you there. So everybody else, thanks so much for joining us today. And Rich is right. Please join us on the next free webinar, February the 2nd, 2016 at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. You can find it at worshipteamtraining.com/events. The link will be up there, and you can click on that. It's a free webinar. After that, it goes back to playback, and you can find the playbacks on the store. And you never know, because one day you may be seeing this person up on a webinar. Who knows? You got to check us out to find out. So anyway, great to have you guys on Periscope. Thanks so much for joining us. Love you guys as always. And if you're not following us on Periscope, please do that. Worship Team Training. That's Worship Team Training on Periscope, Vine, Snapchat, Instagram, Google, Twitter, Facebook, everything. And so next coming up, our next two shows, you can't miss it. Next two shows, we have Laura Marriott coming back again on the 3rd. That's going to be fun, talking about some more vocal stuff. And then our good friend Fred McKinnon is finally going to be on the show. So that, yes, that.
I know Fred. Fred's awesome.
Yes, Fred is a fantastic dude. We've known each other for a long time, but we just have not played in the sandbox together. So now we get our chance. And this is really looking forward to it. It's going to be a lot of fun. So guys, be sure to check us back out at worshipteamtraining.com, as we also are here for you with our mentoring program that you can work one-on-one with guys like Rich, myself, Tim Timmons, Tony Guerrero, whomever. A big list to choose from, worshipteamtraining.com/mentoring, and also /workshops, as we come to your church to put on a weekend for your team. Hands-on practical training, leadership, and also making great fun and having music. And so you can't miss that. worshipteamtraining.com. So glad that you guys are here. Thanks so much again, and we'll see you back on the next Worship Team Hangout. So see you guys soon, and God bless. Bye.